I greet you this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, as I want to just share a short lecture and through this short video to just make some important remarks about chapter 3. The primary target of this lecture are the students who are doing two programs. The first are the students who are doing the Master of Banking in the Master of Science in Banking and Financial Economics at the National University of Science and Technology, the MBFE. And those who are doing their Bachelor of Commerce in Banking and Investment Management degree. But the principles that I share or the points that I share, I've realized that they apply to virtually everyone who is carrying research with the modifications. What I'm sharing are not principles that are cast on stone, but rather I'm just sharing general guidelines to assist those who are writing their research reports, or those who are just about to write their research reports, to write their research reports and produce work which is of high quality. This is my desire and this is my goal, to ensure that our students at university level, whether they be undergraduate students or postgraduate students, namely masters and PhD students, that they produce work which is of very high quality. I just want to give a quick overview of the sort of sections that we expect to see when we are reading the chapter 3 of a student who has done qualitative research. The chapter 3 of a student who has done qualitative research. At a certain point in time, I may give just a brief overview of the chapter 3 of a student who has done quantitative research. That is a student who has estimated an econometric model and has used an experimental research design. So the chapter 3, which comes after literature review, is called the research methodology chapter. And there are key points to note. The first point to note about chapter 3 is that chapter 3 is not a research proposal. And because chapter 3 is not a research proposal, it is wrong to use future tense in chapter 3. Ideally, chapter 3 is written by a student who has actually analyzed their data. Not to talk of the gathering of data, but a student who has actually analyzed their data and completed the data analysis. Only after completing the data analysis will the student describe to us what they consider to be effective and valid research methodologies that they deploy. So without much wasting of time, assuming that the student has been undertaking qualitative research and that the research design has been a non-experimental one, that is a qualitative research design, maybe a survey or some other research design. This is just a guideline of the sort of sections that one may be expected to write. The first part, which is 3.0, is the introduction, just like for any chapter. And then next we've got 3.1, which is the research philosophy. It is imperative for the student to, whether they're doing undergrad or masters or PhD, to tell us the philosophy of their study. We need to know whether the student is following the positivist research paradigm or the interpretivist research paradigm or the phenomenological approach to research. There are so many research paradigms. There is postmodernism, there is post-positivism, and so on. The student must not leave us to guess about the research philosophy upon which their study is anchored. And when a student really, dwells on this aspect, it becomes easier for the student to write research papers and also to motivate for postgraduate study like an MPhil or a PhD degree. And then the next thing which flows from the research philosophy is the research design, which is our 3.2. So 3.1 is the research philosophy, and 3.2 is the research design. And then 3.3 is the population of study. 3.4 is the sampling frame and sampling procedures. 3.5 are data gathering methods or data gathering instruments. That's where we get to read about the methods that were deployed or the instruments that were deployed, which include your questionnaires, your face-to-face interviews or your telephone interviews, or your computer surveys, the survey, and so on, and also their justification. 3.6 is some notes on secondary data, because we can't have a study which is entirely based on primary data, and there is no allusion to data which has been gathered by others, or data which already exists, which has been gathered by either government departments or statutory bodies or international organizations like the World Bank, the IMF, and other institutions like the United Nations Development Program, and so on. And then after 3.6, we've got 3.7, which is the data analysis procedures. We need the student to tell us how they analyzed the gathered data. They don't go into too much detail, but there must be sufficient detail so that we won't have this impression that maybe it's someone else who analyzed the data for the student, or that the research project is actually copied or plagiarized. And then 3.8 is the conclusion or the chapter summary. So once more, I just want to do a rundown of the main segments from 3.0 up to 3.8 of the chapter 3, or the research methodology chapter. 3.0 is the introduction. 3.1 is the research philosophy. 3.2 is the research design. 3.3 is the population of study. 3.4 is the sampling frame and sampling procedures. 3.5 is data gathering methods or data gathering instruments. 3.6 is secondary data. 3.7 is data analysis procedures. 3.8 is the conclusion of the study or the chapter summary. Key points to note. In chapter 3, one does not write in future tense because chapter 3 is not a research proposal. Number 2, in chapter 3, one does not report findings because it's not a chapter of the analysis, presentation, and discussion of results. And then in chapter 3, one does not write research methodology notes. We have had a very big problem in the past. When you evaluate a chapter 3 of a student, the only thing which you see is a student defining key terms like what a research philosophy is, or what a research design is, or what the population of study is, or what sampling is, or what a sampling frame is, or what sampling procedures are. You see a student defining simple random sampling, how it is carried out, when they never actually used it. You discover the student actually used judgmental or purposive sampling, but they go on to talk about systematic sampling and other forms of sampling in great detail. So all these are the dawns of research. All these are the dawns of research or of the research methodology chapter. it's very imperative that the student does what needs to be done in chapter 3 and not give us excess material. So sometimes students, they write for us notes which we do not need. As lecturers, we don't need research methodology notes. What we need from a student is a report of how the study was carried out, the research philosophy which was chosen, and the justification for that research philosophy, the research design which was chosen, and also the justification of the research design. I'm not saying students are not required to, or that students are not supposed to cite authors or to cite the literature in chapter 3. There is a way of citing the literature, but it's not an indiscriminate way of citing literature like someone is doing just a simple literature review. It's the review of research methodologies that were used. I have to emphasize that point. It is the review of the literature of research methodologies that were deployed by the student, not just the literature which is defining for us a population or which is defining for us a research design. We are not interested in that. We are not interested in stories. Chapter 3 is next to the literature review, which I consider to be the heart of the research project. It tells us what you actually did as a research. This is the space where we are able to see how your intervention, what you actually did in chapter 3. So the rest of the material, I'm going to share it in the evening when I get time to dwell on issues like data collection instruments. That's when I'm going to zero in on things like questionnaires. I'm going to look at questionnaires, the advantages of questionnaires and characteristics of a good questionnaire. I'm also going to look at interviews, different types of interviews, and also observation and records. And then the experimental approach and other techniques that can be deployed. They will be shared in a later video, which I'm going to do tomorrow, the 17th of February. But I believe this overview will assist you in understanding research methodology. Thank you so much for listening in. For those who are new to my channel, remember to subscribe to my channel. And also remember to share my video with your colleagues so that they don't trample their lecturers, their research professors, and those who are guiding their research. Information through YouTube is now almost freely available. I know you buy data in order to access YouTube, but those who have got access to Wi-Fi in different institutions, I believe that you can use this information to refine your work. In that way, we make the world a better place. Thank you so much for joining in. I appreciate your taking time to watch my video. Have a nice day.